on the phone. It is always a pleasure to welcome to the program syndicated columnist, bon vivant, I guess, sort of. Apparently, atheist apologist, based upon your last column. And now, it's like This American Life star.
Yeah.
Tina Dupuy. Hello, Tina.
Hi, Sam. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Can't complain.
I understand you started drinking again.
Yeah. Yeah, you heard that rumor too?
Yeah.
There's something about going on National Public Radio and confessing all of your, all of the darkness of your childhood that,
well,
informs the masses.
Now, we will get to that. I mean, well, first of all, and I'll tell people what we're talking about, but, and I knew a little bit about that stuff. I mean, we've talked about it in the past, and we've known each other for a couple of years now. And it occurred to me, like, wait a second, aren't you writing a book about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am.
All right.
I am. I mean, this has been one of those projects where, like,
did I just break
for the
some
last
news?
10 years. No, you didn't.
Oh.
No, I am.
All right. Forget about it.
In your face.
No, it's been one of those things where, like, every time I because I grew up in foster care, and and my parents were in, like, this weird, religious cult. And so, you'd mention that, and people would go, "Oh my God, you need to write a memoir about this." But, for the last decade or so, I've been kind of enjoying people just not knowing about my business. My hate mail is kind of hilarious. I get a lot of, like, people who say that I'm just another, just another entitled liberal, rich liberal. I get that a lot, and I just think it's funny because I've been able to, because I have the privilege of just passing and not having to tell everybody about, my where I came from. So, and I kind of didn't want to blow that, but then I decided to go on American Life.
The strategy didn't
work
when you went on This American Life. I can tell you that. Now, for people who have not, and we will link to the piece at This American Life. But it was a what they organize it into sort of like turning points, or what was it? What is the I can't remember what it was. Like there's a general overall theme with these stories.
The leap.
Leap. And for you, it was after I don't want to date you, but decades. Yeah. Because you thought
you don't want to date me, Sam?
Well, no, you know what I mean. Of course
you don't want me to appear old.
Right. You were.
Yeah, so.
Well, go ahead. You tell it.
You want me to tell it? Okay, my parents were, dressed like hippies, but punished like Calvinists. So, for, what was essentially like an attitude problem, I was put in, I was 11 the first time I was put in a mental institution just for, like, skipping school. And by the time I was 13, I was put in juvenile hall, and just from, like, a bureaucratic snafu, my file was lost, and I was supposed to be there over a weekend, and I ended up being there for nearly 2 months, and just, forgotten about. And didn't know if I was ever going to get out, and so religious people would come in, church groups would come into juvenile hall, and they would say, if you do what we do, you'll have everlasting life. And AA groups came in, and they said, if you do what we do, you never have to come back here. And I was like, done. I'm in AA. So when I was put into foster care, they would take us to AA meetings, and they were like, relate to the feelings inside. Relate to the feelings that people were saying in meetings. And I was like, okay. And people talked about being from a dysfunctional family, and I was like, that's definitely me. And they talked about feeling dead inside, and I came from an abusive family, and I was like, that totally is me. And so I was like, okay, then I'm an alcoholic. And I just kind of assumed that was my issue, and I became kind of AA famous, and I'm published in AA literature. Do you go to an AA meeting? There's a pamphlet that says Young People in AA, and my story's in there. And I was speaking all over the place, and and at 24 years sober, I thought that maybe I wasn't actually an alcoholic, that I could be mistaken about this. And so I decided to actually drink. And that's what the story is about.
All right, and I want to get to that point where you, what made you actually think that at that point? I mean, that you might not be an alcoholic, but just to, to be clear, when you were a kid, I mean, it sounds like your parents were, I mean, I don't know if forcing alcohol on you is the right way to put that, but, I mean, I have a kid. I let her occasionally, a 9-year-old, occasionally have, like, maybe once a year, a sip of wine. But you were drinking alcohol as a kid, right? But it just wasn't that you were. I mean, is that? I mean, so you had access to alcohol as a kid, but it wasn't that you were drinking too much. It was just like you didn't know what the definition of someone who was an alcoholic was, short of those emotional reactions.
Yeah, I think they changed in young people AA. When I got sober, they kind of changed. They moved the goalposts. So it was more of like alcoholic behavior. There was an emphasis on, if you were angry, that's alcoholic behavior. If you, were like, were discontent, that was alcoholic behavior, and it didn't really matter. You didn't have to drink in order to be an alcoholic. You just had to like basically have bad feelings, and so that's what when they were like, you just, if you relate to the feelings, then you're an alcoholic. Well, I mean, it's the human beings are not that complicated. I mean, I can share an emotion with an alcoholic. I can share an emotion with probably every human being on the planet. So like it was just kind of like this weird kind of circular. It gets to this circular logic where, because I'm convinced I'm an alcoholic, then everything that I do is therefore alcoholic behavior, and there was no getting out of that. But yeah, no, I was exposed to, my mother is a drug addict, and so I did, like, in AA meetings I would share that I had a pot laced with PCP when I was 7, and in AA meetings I would share that like I went to the street corner, and scored some PCP. And I was like, my mother gave me that, and they were like overly permissive, and then like really, and at the same time, then they would get these like really harsh punishments. So it was really confusing. So yeah, no, I was exposed to alcohol and drugs from a very young age, but I was the one that was sent away.
And this group,
thankfully, I mean that saved my life. Being in foster care saved my life. I mean, if I didn't get away from those people, I don't know what would have happened to me. Foster care was where I was in school, and I found a love for literature and politics. I figured out that I had an ability to write. There were a lot of fantastic things that happened to me in foster care.
And what of your brother? You had a younger brother.
I do. Yeah, he's referred to him as an Irish twin because he's 14 months younger than I am.
Do you still have a relationship with your parents and your brother?
No, actually, This American Life has to go through a really rigorous fact-checking process now in the wake of the Apple story a couple of years ago. For fans of the show, you'll remember that. But so their fact-checking process is insane, and they had to not only talk. They were talking to my birth parents, who I haven't talked to in years. I just have no interest in having a relationship with them for any reason.
And what about your brother?
He sends me pictures of his kids. I mean, we're on talking terms. I have his phone number in my phone, which is more than I can say for our parents.
And
but
and did This American Life find out that you never worked in a Chinese factory?
Yeah, they did. They discovered that.
So they blew that.
Have no carpal tunnel. Yeah,
open.
I know they did.
And so I mean, how did? All right. So let me ask you this. So what was that moment where you said, "Hey, wait a second, maybe I want to drink"? Like, did it start with like, I want to drink, and then, hey, wait a second, maybe I'm not an alcoholic, or was it, maybe I'm not an alcoholic, I think I want to try and test this out?
Yeah, no, it was a lot more. I mean, it probably started, it was about a 5-year process, where, just kind of sitting, I was sitting in meetings kind of, thinking the things that were, for example, in A and elsewhere, I hear this all the time. People will say, everything happens for a reason, right? And one day I realized that that's actually not true, that we're pattern-seeking people and a species, and everything happens and then we think of a reason for it. And that's not actually, when people say that, it's kind of like this passive thing of what you say when bad things happen, but it's not actually true. And if that's not true, then there's, I could have ended up in A by mistake. And then I talked to a colleague of mine, who was 17 and she was sent to rehab, and turns out that she isn't an addict. She has Asperger's, and she was misdiagnosed. And I thought that was really interesting. And then I just, it was a kind of rethinking this and then putting it away. I mean, it really did take 5 years, and just kind of being curious. And then I talked about it to death with my husband. And then finally it was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to actually, in order to prove this. And they say that in AA. I mean, they don't say that you have to be sober forever because, there are people who are afraid of drinking, which is another thing. But in AA, they say, the way, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, go and try to drink. And so I did.
That's interesting. So in some ways you rejected sort of the ideology, or at least the sort of the within AA. I mean, that notion of everything happens for a reason. That's right. I mean, it's nice that people say that, but usually
Right.
it's just, we just rationalize why it happened.
You got it.
And
Precisely.
when one door closes, guess what? Another door does not automatically open. It's just that you might be looking for doors, and so you may pry one open.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to be
know.
like I don't want to freak people out here, but in terms of physics, one door shutting does not necessarily cause another door to open. It just doesn't happen that way. I mean, I guess if you're in a very tight room where there's air.
Oh my God, you're a heretic.
Yeah. And so that was the beginning of the end, right? Were there other sayings in there? Were there other sort of like things that you started?
I started.
Because it sounds like you were rejecting the sort of like social setting, and that took you down the road to saying like, hey, maybe the fundamental premise as to why I'm in the social setting is wrong, which doesn't necessarily follow, right? I mean, people could say like, I can be sober without being told that there's a higher power, or I can be sober without having to give myself that. I can just go be sober, but that's not the route that you followed.
Yeah, I was actually questioning if I was in fact an alcoholic. I mean, I would talk to I heard other people who were diagnosed, misdiagnosed, but also I started reading about the troubled teen industry, and that my mother got a book called Tough Love, and that's when I started being sent away and having like in ridiculously horrible punishment for like seemingly normal behavior, and what they have in those, what my colleague, friend of mine who wrote a book about this, called it parental absolution. Right, so you have a kid who's like kind of acting out, and I mean, I had like I just as an example, this has been my week, Sam. There was an expose of the women who are walking around the city with babies and begging with children and infants on their hip, and there's like this, and they found out that they're actually like kind of coordinated, and they switch kids, and so there's been a little bit. Yeah, I think NBC New York, the local NBC affiliate, has been investigating this. Well, that was me in the 70s when I was a baby. My mother was one of those people with me on her hip on the streets of Manhattan, selling literature for the cult that we were in, and we did that for 9 months until we went to Europe in New York City. So, like, I was reading that and I was like, that's a horrible way to have to raise a child. And I was like, oh gosh, that's me. So, like, I didn't exactly, my childhood was really kind of rocky, to be euphemistic about it. And so, and then my mother found this book, Tough Love, and what it offered her was a support group where they said things like, look, your kid is spoiled rotten. It's a decadent world, and you've done nothing but love them their entire life. And the only way that they're going to get better, and the only way that they're not going to end up being a dead crack whore, is by the strictest, harshest punishment imaginable. And that's the only way, and it's like this very like puritanical idea where through suffering is salvation. And this resonated with my mother because she didn't have to do anything. It was like the easiest possible thing for her to just send me away, and that's what ended up happening. So as I was reading about the troubled teen industry, and this still Romney, this came up during the last campaign because Romney is kind of connected to the wilderness camps in Utah, the for-profit wilderness camps in Utah. But as I was reading about that stuff, I started realizing that maybe I was just kind of caught up in this like moral panic. Then if I were truly an alcoholic. And there was one way to prove this, and
right.
It was by actually, having a glass of wine, which turns out, now it's like stupid because I've thought for the last 24 years, I thought that I was an alcoholic, which means that I can drink copious amounts of alcohol. And turns out I get like pretty buzzed on half a glass of Chardonnay and really can't drink all that much, which is
so you're a lightweight.
Just embarrassing. Oh, it's embarrassing. It's so humiliating to think that like I'm a badass and be the exact opposite of a badass.
All right. So let me ask you this. So it sounds like that tough love like support group was sort of your mom's way of like also saying like none of her behavior is a function of what I've done.
Yep. You got it.
What was the cult that they were in? Was she in the cult at that time? What was the cult or the new religious?
The cult was, no, it's not a new religious group. It is a cult. The Children of God. Actually, I think if you Google cult, it's like one of the first things that come up. The Children of God, it changed its name to the Family. Rose McGowan, River Phoenix were in the same group. It makes news every so often. I think in 2005, the heir apparent made a video and killed his abuser and then shot himself, and that was like it. So it was like on a Law and Order episode. It's never good when it's in the news, but yeah. So my mother believes today that this is her, that she followed a prophet. That she found someone who could talk to God, and she still believes that. She never quite left spiritually, I guess. But and they have certain, cult members have certain attributes, they just kind of reflexively lie to people who are on the outside because they don't understand. And so there's that kind of conditioning when you're in that kind of group. But I think that she just found a new kind of, and they also in the group they also have these really harsh punishments for any kind of doubt or rebellion to kind of keep people in line. So I think that on many levels, tough love resonated with her when she had an ornery 10-year-old kid, 10-year-old daughter.
Now, this isn't the family. Didn't Jeff Charlotte write a book about the family that was?
No, that's a different group.
That's a different group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This was the Family of Love, the Children of God. Yeah, that was a different group. That was a different cult.
And so when she went to this tough love support group thing, was everybody else around the table were they I'm a suburban family that's just has a kid who's has real problems. She's not bringing to the table that, incidentally, my kid just may be reacting to the fact that we belong to a cult and we do all sorts of horrible things in the cult to children. That didn't come up, it sounds like.
No, because the default position is that your children are decadent or your children have been spoiled. And that's the problem. If you have a kid,
nobody says
rebelling,
hey, your kid just may be rationally reacting to a situation you put them in.
Right. Or your kid has autism, or your kid has post-traumatic stress disorder, which I believe was my main issue. I had a lot of recurring nightmares and stuff. And now that I no longer have to view everything through the lens of being an alcoholic. Now it's okay. I probably was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So, you like, yeah, they none of that stuff. And I think that I'm not alone. I think there are a lot of kids who were misdiagnosed because, they wanted to see what they wanted to see instead of what was actually there.
And so let me ask you this: how does it? What has it done in terms of? I mean, I get a sense of like you can sort of start to address that part of your life insofar as like you were not a bad kid, you were just a normal kid reacting to being put in a bad situation. I would imagine there's a lot of emotional turmoil involved in that. What also about like the idea of like you're no longer identifying yourself? I mean, it seems to me like your time in Alcoholics Anonymous was like a big part of your support structure and identity. I mean, I think you said on the This American Life thing that it actually ended up saving your life.
Well, yeah, I mean, it became my family. When I accomplished something, I didn't go. I didn't have parents to go to. So, like, when my column became syndicated, or I won an award or whatever, I would go to an AA meeting and share about it. It was my default. It was my family. It was my community. It was where I belonged. And so, like, I was also risking that by drinking. But yeah, just to circle back, I mean, your question about the emotional turmoil. I mean, Nancy Updike pointed this out to me, and I was unaware. She said that because she listened to all my speaker tapes.
She's the producer who did the piece for This American Life.
Yeah. And so she said, you are the villain in all of your stories. And, most people are the protagonists of their own stories. And I was the opposite. And the thing about AA, they would say, I'd sit in meetings and they would say, there are no victims over 18. And I was like, yeah, but I'm under 18, but I'm really mature for my age. So, I took responsibility for everything. And when you have responsibility for things, you can regret. And once you can regret, you have like this delusion of control and power. Like, if I didn't do this as a 4-year-old, then maybe this would not have happened. And so I took responsibility for every horrible thing that, allegedly horrible thing that I did as a kid, and decided that I was going to make amends for it. And I was going to, do good deeds in order to make up for this. And then I, after I actually had a drink of alcohol, I found one day myself Googling the phrase child abuse, and I was reading about kids who are emotionally abused, and it said that kids who are emotionally abused often blame themselves. Now, I fully knew this intellectually. Like, every time I saw someone who was, a beaten housewife would say, oh, I deserved it, I was mouthing off. And I'm like, no, that's not okay. But I had never applied that to myself, where I was kind of taking responsibility for everything that had ever happened in my family, and didn't realize that that's exactly what I was doing. And so, to answer your question, it is liberating.
Wow.
To not be no longer the villain, but be no longer responsible for everybody else's problems. It makes me feel kind of humiliated that it took this long, but, I was busy surviving,
right,
essentially. But, like, yeah, I mean, it's freeing. I mean, I really do feel like I walk down the street and I'm 150 pounds lighter. I mean, it's like the feeling is astronomical. I can't even describe it.
Wow. That's amazing. And what about, is there some sense of loss? Like, have you gone back to any AA meetings? Is there some sense of loss there in terms of like the identification you forged in the context of AA?
You would think, but no, I don't feel. I feel like this is like that the world has opened to me, and I'm figuring out things that were not true, and then I'm also figuring out things that are true, and things that I rationalized for years. I no longer have to spend the energy trying to make things fit. The people who I am really close to, who are still in AA, I'm still close to. I didn't lose any friends. I probably lost some people who were never really, like my acquaintances may not talk to me, but that's okay. But yeah, more there's just elation. I might just be at that phase of it, but like, no, the loss isn't there whatsoever. I think before I came out of the closet, I was afraid of being found out and gossiped about, but now that's over.
That you were afraid that the people in AA would be gossiping, like she doesn't think that she's an alcoholic, that type of thing.
Or like, or hoping that I would, essentially hoping I would fail, right? Because they're like the moderation management, the woman who founded moderation management killed someone by drunk driving, and so everyone gets to be smug about that because moderation management clearly doesn't work because I know someone who it didn't work for and whatever. So there's that kind of like, because I'm putting myself out there in a very, very public way. I essentially am, there's like a part of them that it's like wants me to essentially fail to, kind of reinforce that narrative.
Right.
So there's a bit of that, but mainly it's just, I want my story or I want to be able to talk about the troubled teen industry and foster care system and all the stuff that I have not been able, I knew about intimately, but I've not been able to talk about or write about because I'm not out of the closet, because it's like this long, weird story that I just didn't want to get into because I wanted to write about like Congress or whatever, was more interesting to me than the stuff of where I came from. Like I was trying to run away from that as fast as possible.
Yeah,
so
at some level,
now,
like your delusion. I mean, was it you were trying to protect the identity, or did the identity prevent you from actually perceiving? You know what I'm saying? Like
the way my public persona versus
or just
my
the narrative
identity.
that your narrative you have of your own life over that time. I mean, it's amazing because you have none of the facts of your life have really fundamentally changed. It's just that you actually are seeing them as they really are.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's exactly it.
Dude, why
and
you're writing that book right now.
I am. I am. I'm. I mean, if there are any publishers listening, I haven't found one.
Are you kidding? Are you serious?
No, I haven't. No, I just haven't had any offers yet. I mean, it's been 5 days.
Do you need a literary agent? Because I guess what I just started doing, becoming a literary agent.
Are you a literary agent?
I am
you want
today.
15% of this? Okay.
Are you kidding? It's an amazing story. I mean, I remember you've been talking about writing a book about it, but that was before you realized that you had sort of had your old narrative, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, here's the honest truth, and why I didn't want to write the book is because my story was that I was a really bad kid, and I was afraid that when I wrote the book, everyone would sympathize with my poor mother who had to deal with me.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, it's dark, right? So, and then it wasn't until I started thinking about this, and my husband was like, you're not a mean person, and you're pretty emotionally even-keeled. You don't have highs and lows, and you're also...
Didn't your husband say to you, like, at one point, like, I got news for you, with all due respect, your mom was a jackass?
Yeah, all the time.
Oh, okay.
All the time.
But that's the thing. People never listen to their husbands, is what my experience is.
Yeah, that's, it's probably a good practice. But, I mean, his job was not to, shake me awake. His job was just to kind of go, like, I'm here with you, like, whatever you need, we'll deal with it when it comes. And, I mean, so, yeah, it's been a long, jarring process, but I feel like now I have an opportunity to, talk about issues of poverty and foster care and kids who, are in the system. I don't know if there's anybody who has really gone through what I've gone through who has a profile or, a public platform like I do. I feel like I'm in a unique position, and I haven't really taken advantage of that because I've been afraid to tell everybody about, just the weird crap that I had to go through.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so how did you end up like on This American Life? You were like, I'm going to have a drink, and then I'm going to call This American Life.
Well, I mean, I went through this whole thing, and then I wrote an essay that it's actually, I hope, and I think it's still going to be published in Marie Claire in February. But so I wrote this essay about the whole process and what, like the revelation after. I mean, essentially, after I realized I was an alcoholic, I'm like, if I'm not an alcoholic, I'm an abused child, and that's, it's one or the other, because
right.
like if I'm an alcoholic, everything that my parents did was for the greater good, because they were trying to save my life through these really harsh conditions. And look, I'm sober, so they mission accomplished. But after years of sitting in AA meetings, where like when families make this sacrifice and kind of detach, then they come back and they reunite with the alcoholic. But that never happened for me. They just
right.
never came back, and it was like, okay, well, this is weird.
That was
this
a tip
is not
off.
exactly. Yeah, right. I was like, no, this is not exactly how it goes.
And how come none of these other families belong to a cult where they bring their kids on their hip and
exactly
do all this crazy effed up stuff?
Right. Exactly. So yeah. Anyway, I wrote. So I had this kind of realization, and it was pretty like it's pretty gnarly. Anyway, I wrote it, and then a friend of mine who worked at Morning Edition read it, and he was like, "You have to send this to This American Life." And I've been a huge fan of This American Life for years, and I sent it to one of the producers, and then Nancy Updike, who I'm also a huge fan of, emailed me and said, "Would you like to come into the studio?" And I mean, Sam, we had like 8 hours of an 8-hour interview over 2 days.
Wow.
And it was gnarly. It was like bloodletting.
It sounded like it, actually. I mean, it sounded, there's only like, obviously, like you listen to it, it's a 20-minute piece, and there's, I don't know how many actual minutes of you talking there are, but it does seem like it was very emotional for you.
It was, I mean, and I was having realizations that things that I as I was in the studio, I was saying things out loud that I had never said before, and then I had never thought about before.
You should get those tapes,
dude,
for your book to write.
Right. Well, so then I start. You'll like this. So then I start crying, and and I'm snotting everywhere, and I was like, Nancy, I need some Kleenex, and so she like runs around the studio, and the only thing she can find is a roll of toilet paper, and I was like, okay, well, this should be like the tweet when you guys are raising money. National Public Radio, don't even have, like, make your interviewee cry, but don't even have the decency to have a box of Kleenex.
Tissue.
Toilet paper. So yeah, it was.
That's not the way we do it around the Majority Report. I'm holding a box of Kleenex in my hand right now.
Oh my God, double ply, triple ply. What do you got?
Soft stuff. The soft stuff.
Yeah, it was, and then they are so. Nancy is so incredibly brilliant and was also really emotionally involved in the story, and I think that comes across in the piece.
Yep.
Where she was very empathetic, even though when during the fact checking process when she had to talk to my parents, I mean, I was in a fetal position. I couldn't, the whole the kind of like.
Wait, you weren't there while she was talking to them, were
Oh
you?
no. But I mean, I knew that was happening. And so, I'm gripped in fear because, my whole story is kind of based on my parents lying about me for their own purposes. And I'm terrified that they're just going to try to, it's going to be about my credibility versus theirs, which, had led me to be locked up when I was a kid. So this was like, this really.
You're still, I mean, at some level, you're still caught in that because of the 4 people who are listening right now to this program, no one, it's like, it's so, there's no, like the idea that anybody would take their word, but I guess that's the sort of the dynamic that you have as an 11-year-old or a 9-year-old, right? Is that you still see your parents. When was the last time you spoke to your parents?
It was whenever Network Nation was in Las Vegas was the last time I talked to my mother. I was on the drive back, and I realized that she was just thoroughly and bad intentioned. She would like, because she has enjoyed the narrative that I was a horrible kid and that, she did the best that she could.
I remember I remember you telling me the story, I think, at that time.
Yeah. So, I remember driving back, and I had a good weekend, and it was a lot of fun, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. And then my mother called, and she started, she wanted to relitigate something that happened when I was like 7. I don't know. She's just like, it was just one of those, and it kind of occurred to me that she's never going to be nice to me. She's never going to encourage me. She's never read anything that I've ever written. She's just not a nice person. And I was like, I don't have to talk to you anymore. I don't have to have a relationship with you anymore. And if I think of you as my mother, it's actually very depressing. I'm really close with my foster parents, and that's who gave me away at my wedding. And that's who I call, when I need advice, whether I'm going to wear pearls or rhinestones to the, White House Correspondents' Dinner, like that kind of stuff. I mean, I think of them as my parents. And if I think of them as my parents, I'm a happy person. But if I think of my birth parents as my parents, it's horribly depressing.
Wow. How have they reacted to this?
My foster parents?
Yeah.
Oh, they're completely traumatized. They're so uncomfortable with having any kind of, it's an interesting question. So when I was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, bookish foster kid, there were people lined up who wanted me to be their spokesperson and their poster child for their whatever their little pet issue was. My foster dad protected me from a lot of that. He didn't want me to be exploited. He wanted me to have a private life. He wanted me to be able to succeed and fail in private and not have to have the scrutiny of publicity on my life decisions. And that was really important to him. So, and he's also a very private person, and he also doesn't feel like it's his place to disclose anything about me. So when the fact checkers called him, that really stressed them out. It was like this weird irony that the people who were, did horrible things to me were the ones who were kind of, cool with it. And then the people who were my, the people who saved me were the ones who were actually being, traumatized by the fact checkers.
It also sounds like they're the most protective of you.
That exactly. And that was, from the very, the first time when I first met them, I realized that that's really what they wanted to do, was things in my best interest and protect me, which was something that I had never experienced with my birth family at all.
And
this is horrible. I can't believe that people are actually listening to this. This feels like I'm just talking to you on the phone. Oh, this is.
How did they react to? I mean, did they feel? Have you talked to them about that they didn't have? Do they feel bad that they didn't have the awareness to tell you? I mean, obviously, you couldn't expect them to, right? Because it was your narrative. There's no reason for them to question it. And certainly a foster parent's not going to go "Hey, you're 15 now. Let's see if you can drink. You can drink."
Right.
I mean, but on some level, I mean, have they said "Gosh, we wish that we had," sort of questioned the narrative that you were delivered to us with, or?
No, I mean, I think that they because they weren't able to, after I aged out, they were still busy with other kids, and so they couldn't be, we couldn't be close until they were retired. So they kind of err on the side of sobriety anyway. They think that so what I didn't have to drink fluorescent blue stuff and puke that color when I was in 21. That's not a huge loss. They feel they kind of erred on the side of sobriety, which was fine. And I also found a community, and so I don't think that they regret that. And I agree with that on some level. But there's a part of me that's it's almost like a consolation prize. I was I was told at 13 that I was a diabetic, for example, and then I'm told that like if I eat cake, I will die, and so I just don't. And then one day I decide that like maybe that's not true, and I decide to eat cake, and then I go, wait a second, I'm not a diabetic, and they go, yeah, but you ate better,
Right?
and it's like, okay, but there's nothing I can do about that now, and I did, I did find people who cared about me, and I found a place where I could belong. Now, I don't think that I don't think the standards should be lowered for young people as far as alcoholism. I think that there are people who are 16 years old who end up in AA who absolutely belong there.
Right.
I think that and it could be different now. But when I got there, it was kind of everybody was in recovery for everything, and there was this kind of feeling that like the 12 steps would kind of heal all ailments. So if you got to AA and did the 12 steps, you were better off than people who didn't. And there was that kind of feeling where now, there's been a bit of a sea change in at least the recovery movement. There's questioning new data as to like how we view alcoholics, and there's a lot of kids who have problems as teenagers, and then once they get a job, graduate college, they no longer have those same issues. There's a lot more of there's been research on that. There's been research about drug addiction and the kind of like old trope that you smoke crack once, then you're a crackhead. That's actually not true. That it's the lack of opportunity that get people doing crack. And there's a movement in California. I think it was Proposition 47 that to people. Not to lock people away for the rest of their lives just because they were found with drugs or drug addicts or whatever. So there's a different way of viewing these issues than there were when I got
Right.
I'm doing air quotes sober.
Wow, it's an unbelievable story, Tina.
Well, thanks, Sam.
It's obviously a little bit bigger than a story, but. But I guess so. Do you have a movie recommendation for us?
Are we like I asked
Dude,
you this follow-up question. No, I asked you this follow-up question yesterday. I said, is it like something in the theater or? Okay, last night.
Well, no, it's no, you don't. I mean, it's actually streaming. It's streaming.
Okay.
Well, because the whole premise of this, right? I mean, we've been down this road before.
No. Hello, darkness.
But I did.
Friend.
Yeah. Wow. I mean.
Okay.
Well, I'm happy for you,
question?
Tina. Let me just say that before we move on to the film part.
So no, okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, Sam. And this was a very enlightening conversation. I'm thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you.
Yesterday I went to my one of my favorite drag queens, Hedda Lettuce, hosts the Chelsea Classics in Chelsea on Thursdays, and there was they played the Birdcage and the Robin Williams Nathan Lane film,
right?
And the person who did the makeup on the film was there to talk about it, and I always thought that was a stupid film that like gave Robin Williams an excuse to be swishy, and it was just like, and it is kind of a depressing film. But what the makeup person pointed out was that in order to like sell the relationship between Nathan Lane and Robin Williams like was touching Nathan Lane in every scene. Like they were very physically close in order to kind of sell the love story between these two characters, and like that they had been together for over 20 years, and and they get like gay married, like 90s style gay married in the film, and it's actually really touching. And so it was a completely different way of watching this film that I think I really didn't like when I saw it when it came out.
Interesting.
So that's my recommendation.
Is that a movie I could show my my 9-year-old daughter?
If you want her to end up in rehab at 13, yeah. No, it's pretty. I maybe wait until she's 12.
I can wait. We can wait to watch that if that's not going to be a.
I didn't know one of the requirements for the movie recommendation was that a 9-year-old had to enjoy it.
No, I mean I'm just looking because we get in there and it's movie night tomorrow.
And you're
night.
tired of watching Frozen?
Well, we'll probably end up watching Malevolent.
Oh man. Okay.
It's out now on iTunes, and she's been waiting a long time for that.
That's harsh, man.
That's my life.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Now you can go out and drink.
Right.
Now you can go out and party. Tina.
Yeah, that's me. I'm gonna go clubbing.
Well, yeah. I mean, people don't. Do people drink that? Ever drink that fluorescent blue liquor? Other than
I have no idea what she's talking about. Actually, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Your whole notion of the drinking culture came from that movie Cocktail.
Yeah, pretty much. That's probably true. It's probably true.
Well, Tina, thanks for talking to us about it. We didn't really plan to have that big of a conversation, but it's fascinating.
Oh yeah, I know. I thought we were going to talk about my column or politics, but it ended up being a therapy
We'll
session.
get into the atheist stuff. I have a feeling we're gonna.
We are?
What?
What atheist stuff?
Well, when you were.
Oh, I'm an atheist apologist?
Yeah,
What?
exactly.
I am?
Think over under God? Excuse me?
Yeah. Okay, you have to read the whole thing because you can't just go by the headline.
Well, that's all. That's what we do around here. That's the way we attack people. All right, Tina. Well, we'll do this again soon, and I'll be in touch for our coffee session.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam.
All right.
Have a good
Bye,
weekend.
Tina Dupuy, folks.
Bye.
TinaDupuy.com, ladies and gentlemen, where you can get links to all her columns. And, man, she better get on that book. It's an unbelievable, amazing.